Ava had grown up hearing stories about the land her grandfather had once owned. She remembered the tales he told her as a child, about wide green meadows, towering oak trees, and a quiet stream that ran through the property. Her grandfather had always spoken with pride about the land, saying it was a place where a person could feel free, away from the noise and the rules of the city. As a child, Ava imagined herself running through those fields, exploring every corner and feeling the wind on her face. Years passed and life took her far from that place. She moved to the city for studies and later started a small career. The memories of her grandfather's land stayed with her, but she thought she would never return. Then one morning she received a letter that changed everything. Her grandfather had passed away, and she was now the legal owner of the property. Ava felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She packed her belongings carefully, making sure to bring some essentials for living on the land. When she finally arrived, the landscape was exactly as her grandfather had described. Rolling hills stretched for miles, dotted with patches of wildflowers. The stream shimmered in the sunlight, and the air smelled of fresh earth and grass. Ava's heart raced as she walked through the entrance, her eyes scanning every detail. The barn still stood, weathered but sturdy, and the old fence marked the boundary of her inherited land. Ava was eager to start exploring, but she sensed she was not alone. The neighborhood was quiet, but there was a presence that made her pause. A woman in her 50s, with sharp features and a strict expression, was standing near one of the nearby houses. She was holding a clipboard and seemed to be inspecting something. Ava recognized her immediately. This was Karen, the president of the Homeowners Association. Stories about Karen had reached even the city. She was known for enforcing every rule in the neighborhood, from paint colors to the height of the grass. People often whispered that Karen had made life difficult for many residents over the years. Ava took a deep breath and walked toward Karen. She smiled politely, hoping to make a good impression. "Hello," Ava said. "I'm Ava. I just inherited the property here. It's nice to meet you." Karen turned, her eyes narrowing as she studied Ava. She gave a small, tight-lipped smile. "I see," she said. "I'm Karen. Welcome to the neighborhood. I hope you understand we have rules here that all residents must follow." Ava nodded. "Of course. I want to make sure I understand everything properly." She hoped her calm tone would show Karen that she was respectful, but not easily intimidated. Karen's smile remained polite but was cold. She listed some of the rules, mentioning garden layouts, fence regulations, and property maintenance standards. Ava listened attentively, taking mental notes. She did not interrupt or argue. When Karen finished, Ava thanked her and promised to review the rules carefully. As Ava walked back to her property, she could feel Karen watching her. The woman's stare was sharp, almost challenging. Ava understood that Karen was used to residents being nervous or submissive. But Ava had grown up listening to her grandfather's lessons. She knew the importance of staying calm and confident, even when faced with someone aggressive or controlling. Ava spent the rest of the day walking through her land. She explored the stream, noticing the small rocks and tiny fish swimming in the clear water. She checked the barn and found some old tools that had been left behind. Each item seemed to tell a story of the past. Ava could almost hear her grandfather's voice as she walked through the fields, reminding her to respect the land and make it her own. That evening, Ava set up a small tent near the barn. She was not ready to move into the house just yet, as it needed some repairs, but she wanted to stay close to the land, to feel its energy and start planning what she would do. The sun was setting, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. Ava sat by the edge of the stream, letting the calmness of the surroundings wash over her. As the light faded, Ava thought about the neighborhood. She knew that Karen would be a challenge. The stories she had heard were not exaggerated. Karen controlled the HOA strictly, and she did not like surprises. Ava wondered what the woman would think of her, the new owner who had returned unexpectedly. But Ava also knew she had the right to her land. She was determined to handle the situation with intelligence and patience. The next morning, Ava woke early. She wanted to start working on the property before Karen or any neighbors came by. She began by cleaning up the area near the barn. There were old leaves, broken branches, and some debris that had accumulated over the years. As she worked, she noticed some wildflowers growing near the edge of the stream. They were beautiful, delicate, and untouched by anyone. Ava decided to leave them as they were, wanting to preserve the natural beauty of the land. After a few hours, Ava heard the familiar sound of a car approaching. She looked up and saw Karen pulling into the driveway next door. The woman stepped out, her clipboard in hand, and walked over with a purposeful stride. Ava stood and waved politely. "Good morning," Ava said. "Is there something you wanted to discuss?" Karen adjusted her glasses and studied Ava carefully. "I wanted to make sure you understand your responsibilities as a new property owner," she said. "We have strict rules here, and I will be checking that everything is in order." Ava smiled calmly. "I appreciate the information. I will make sure to follow the rules and keep the property in good condition." Karen's eyes narrowed slightly. She was used to residents panicking at her words, apologizing, and promising to comply. Ava's calm and polite response confused her. She had expected fear or uncertainty, but instead she saw confidence. For the next few hours, Ava worked quietly, tending to the land and organizing her tools. She noticed some neighbors walking by, giving her curious glances. They seemed unsure whether to approach her or not. Ava waved and smiled at them, hoping to make a friendly impression. Slowly, a few of them nodded back, showing cautious approval. As the day progressed, Ava began to think about the future. She wanted to restore the land, improve the barn, and maybe even plant a small garden. But she also knew she had to be strategic about dealing with Karen. The woman was powerful in the neighborhood, but Ava realized that knowledge and patience could balance power. She decided to read through old HOA documents and property papers in the evening to understand her rights and responsibilities fully. By sunset, Ava had cleared the area near the barn, set up a small outdoor space with chairs, and even started a tiny fire for warmth. She felt a sense of peace she had not felt in years. The land was hers, and with it came freedom, responsibility, and opportunity. As Ava sat by the fire, she reflected on the day. Karen's presence was a challenge, but it was not an obstacle she could not handle. Ava knew that respect and intelligence would guide her decisions. She thought about her grandfather, imagining him smiling at her from somewhere beyond. She promised herself that she would honor the land, protect it, and make it flourish. Night fell, and the stars appeared above the property. The stream reflected the moonlight, creating a shimmering path across the field. Ava felt calm, confident, and ready for whatever challenges awaited her. She knew that returning to her inherited land was the first step in a journey that would test her patience, courage, and wisdom. But she also knew that she was ready to face it all. And so Ava's return to her grandfather's land marked the beginning of a new chapter. The land was alive with possibilities, and Ava was determined to claim her place with dignity, respect, and quiet strength. She did not yet know the full extent of the challenges ahead, but one thing was certain: she would face them with courage, and the land she inherited would be her home once more. The morning sun rose over the rolling hills of Ava's inherited land, casting golden light across the green fields. Birds sang cheerfully and the stream sparkled under the new day. Ava woke early, feeling a sense of purpose. She had spent the previous day settling into her land and understanding its layout, but today she planned to explore more and take notes for the improvements she wanted to make. Before she could begin, she noticed movement at the edge of the property. Karen was walking along the street, her clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the houses and yards of the neighborhood. Ava felt a small pang of anxiety, remembering the stories she had heard about Karen's strict enforcement of rules. But Ava reminded herself that she was the rightful owner of her land, and no one could intimidate her if she knew her rights. Ava decided to start her morning work first. She picked up her tools and began clearing debris from an old stone path near the barn. While working, she noticed wildflowers growing along the edge. They were small but vibrant, and Ava decided they should remain untouched. She worked carefully around them, making sure not to damage a single bloom. The peacefulness of the work calmed her, and for a while the tension about Karen faded. After a few hours, Ava paused for water and noticed Karen approaching. Her steps were deliberate, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone used to control. Ava wiped her hands and greeted her politely. "Good morning, Karen," Ava said. "I hope you are well." Karen's smile was thin, almost forced. "I see you are busy already," she said. "I wanted to talk to you about your property and the rules that apply here." Ava nodded. "I would be happy to hear more. I want to understand everything so I can follow the rules properly." Karen began listing rules from the HOA handbook. She spoke about fence heights, paint colors, garden layouts, and even minor details like mailbox placement. Ava listened attentively, taking careful notes in her notebook. She did not argue or interrupt, allowing Karen to finish. When Karen paused, Ava spoke calmly. "Thank you for explaining the rules. I will review them in detail. I want to make sure I understand everything fully." Karen frowned slightly. She had expected resistance, panic, or at least hesitation, but Ava's calm response puzzled her. She left without another word, making Ava realize that this encounter, while uncomfortable, had also given her some insight. Karen assumed her authority was absolute, but Ava's patience and politeness had neutralized her first attempt at intimidation. Once Karen left, Ava returned to her work. She walked around the land, carefully inspecting the barn, the fences, and the stream area. She noticed spots where repairs were needed. Some fence posts were weak, and parts of the barn roof had minor damage. Ava made a note to fix these gradually. She wanted to show care for the land while also maintaining her independence from Karen's strict oversight. Later that day, Ava sat down in the small study area she had set up in the barn. She opened the documents her grandfather had left behind. There were property deeds, old maps, and some letters. As she read through them, she discovered something important. Her ownership gave her full authority over the property, including decisions that could affect HOA regulations. Ava realized the significance of this. Karen had assumed she controlled everything, but the legal documents showed otherwise. Ava now had the power to make decisions about her land without being overruled by Karen. It was not a matter of arrogance. It was a matter of law and inheritance. Ava felt a surge of confidence. She knew she had to act carefully, but she also understood that knowledge could be more powerful than aggression. Determined to learn more, Ava spent the afternoon reviewing HOA documents online. She read every rule, every clause, and every exception. Slowly, she began to understand where her rights intersected with Karen's authority. Some rules were strict, but others were vague, giving her room to make improvements legally. Ava realized that with careful planning, she could enhance her land, follow the law, and still assert her independence. That evening, Ava took a walk along the stream. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the land. She watched the water flow gently, reflecting the pink and orange hues of the sky. As she walked, she thought about Karen and the neighbors. Many residents had followed Karen's rules without question for years. But Ava saw an opportunity to show that the land could be beautiful and well kept without strict enforcement. She wanted to lead by example, showing respect for the community while also asserting her rights. The next morning, Ava began small improvements. She cleared a section of the garden, leaving the wildflowers untouched. She repaired a few weak fence posts and made the barn door easier to open and close. Each action was careful and deliberate. Ava wanted to make progress without provoking unnecessary conflict, but she also wanted to establish her presence as the new owner. By mid-morning, Karen appeared again. She walked directly toward Ava, her clipboard ready, eyes scanning every change. "I see you have started making changes," Karen said. "Are you aware that certain modifications require HOA approval?" Ava looked up calmly. "I have reviewed the rules carefully. The changes I have made are within my rights as the property owner. I wanted to improve safety and preserve the natural beauty of the land." Karen's eyes narrowed. "You cannot just decide that yourself. The HOA has standards for every property here." Ava smiled politely. "I understand the standards. I have made sure that every improvement follows local regulations and respects the neighborhood guidelines. If there are specific concerns, I am willing to discuss them." Karen hesitated, clearly frustrated. She had expected fear or an apology, but Ava remained composed. Karen walked away, muttering under her breath. Ava knew that this was only the beginning of a long negotiation. Karen would continue to test her, but Ava now understood that calm knowledge was her strongest tool. That afternoon, Ava organized her notes from the HOA documents and made a plan for the next steps. She wanted to improve the land gradually, ensure compliance with laws, and maintain a good relationship with neighbors. She knew Karen would watch closely, so every decision had to be strategic and deliberate. As Ava worked, a few neighbors approached. They greeted her cautiously, curious about the new owner who had returned after many years. Ava smiled and introduced herself, explaining that she wanted to restore the land and maintain the beauty of the neighborhood. Some neighbors nodded with approval, sharing small tips about the area. Ava appreciated their friendliness. She realized that building trust with neighbors would be important, especially as she navigated her interactions with Karen. By sunset, Ava had repaired a small section of the barn roof, cleaned the area near the stream, and planted a few herbs in a small patch near the garden. She stepped back to admire her work, feeling a sense of accomplishment. The land was alive and responding to her care. Ava knew she was making progress, and each step gave her confidence to face the challenges ahead. As night fell, Ava sat by the stream again, reflecting on the day. She thought about Karen, the HOA, and the neighbors. She knew she had returned to her inherited land, not just to claim ownership, but to bring balance and respect to the community. She promised herself that she would act wisely, make thoughtful decisions, and prove that leadership could come from knowledge and fairness, rather than control and intimidation. The stars appeared above, shining brightly over the land. Ava felt a deep connection to her grandfather's legacy and a determination to honor it. She knew that challenges were ahead, especially with Karen's presence looming over the neighborhood. But Ava was ready. She had the knowledge, patience, and courage to navigate the situation and assert her rightful place as the owner of the land. And so, Ava's journey of discovery and empowerment continued. She had returned to her inherited land and had already begun to uncover her rights, her responsibilities, and her potential. The days ahead would test her in ways she could not yet imagine, but she was prepared to face them with strength, wisdom, and calm determination. The next morning, Ava woke early with a sense of purpose. The sun had not yet fully risen, but she could hear birds singing in the trees. The air was fresh, and the land around her seemed to stretch endlessly, full of promise. After careful planning the night before, Ava had decided to begin making small improvements to the property. She wanted to show that her land could be beautiful, well-kept, and unique, while still following all rules and respecting the neighborhood. Ava started near the edge of the stream. She cleared some old leaves and fallen branches, creating a natural path that followed the water's edge. While doing so, she noticed patches of wildflowers, untouched and delicate. Ava smiled and carefully worked around them, ensuring none of them were damaged. She thought about how her grandfather would have loved this view, how he would have told her stories about the wildlife and the plants that had grown here for decades. Once the path was cleared, Ava turned her attention to the barn. The roof had a few weak spots and the door had squeaked for years. She spent several hours reinforcing the roof with new shingles and oiling the hinges on the door. Each task required focus and patience, but Ava found joy in the work. By the afternoon, the barn looked refreshed, standing proudly as a centerpiece of her land. As Ava worked, she noticed movement near the property line. Karen was approaching again, her clipboard in hand, walking with a determined stride. Ava straightened up and greeted her politely. "Good morning, Karen," Ava said. "I hope you are having a good day." Karen's thin smile did not reach her eyes. "I see you have started making changes to your property," she said. "Are you aware that certain modifications require HOA approval?" Ava nodded calmly. "Yes, I have reviewed the rules. The changes I have made are within my rights as the property owner. My goal is to maintain and improve the property while respecting the neighborhood standards." Karen's eyes narrowed. She clearly had expected a different response. "I have seen other residents follow the rules without issue. You should do the same," Ava smiled politely. "I understand and I intend to do so. I am making sure all improvements are safe, legal, and respectful. If there are specific concerns, I am happy to discuss them, but I believe these changes are appropriate." Karen's jaw tightened. She had expected residents to hesitate, to worry, to plead. Ava's calm confidence was unsettling. Karen turned abruptly and walked away, muttering under her breath. Ava returned to her work, feeling a sense of quiet triumph. She knew that Karen's authority was being challenged simply by Ava's knowledge and patience. Over the next few days, Ava continued her improvements. She planted small clusters of native flowers near the barn and along the stream, creating a colorful, natural border. She installed a simple solar-powered fountain that added a gentle sound of water to the land. She even repainted the barn in a cheerful, warm shade that brightened the surroundings. Every step was planned carefully, respecting both local regulations and her own vision for the property. Word began to spread among the neighbors. Some had been curious about the new owner, but now they were intrigued by the changes. They noticed the improvements were thoughtful and beautiful, A few neighbors approached Ava to ask questions and share small tips about caring for the land. Ava welcomed them warmly, grateful for their support. Slowly, she began to realize that many people in the neighborhood admired her courage and care for the property. Karen noticed the changes too. She walked by one afternoon, her clipboard ready, expecting to find violations or mistakes. But as she examined the property, she found nothing to complain about. Every detail followed the rules. Her frustration grew, but she had no legal grounds to object. Ava had planned carefully, and Karen's strict control over the neighborhood rules was being tested without breaking any laws. One morning, Ava decided to take a walk through the property with her notebook, noting areas for future improvements. As she walked, she thought about the balance she wanted to achieve. She did not want conflict with Karen, but she also did not want to be intimidated. Her grandfather's lessons came to mind. Respect the land, respect the neighbors, but never let fear control your actions. As she explored the far edge of the property, Ava noticed a fallen tree blocking a small section of the stream. She decided to clear it carefully, creating a small wooden bridge for easier access. The work required effort, but Ava enjoyed it. She felt connected to the land, as if each improvement was a way to honor her grandfather's legacy. Later that day, Karen appeared again. This time she seemed more tense than usual. She stood near the newly planted flowers and fountain, her clipboard shaking slightly. "You have made many changes," Karen said sharply. "I will need to review each one to ensure compliance with the HOA rules." Ava remained calm. "I welcome your review, Karen. I have made sure everything follows local regulations and neighborhood standards. My goal is to improve the property while respecting everyone." Karen paused, clearly frustrated. She had expected confrontation or uncertainty, but Ava's polite confidence left her unsure how to respond. She made some notes on her clipboard and walked away, muttering about needing to check the HOA handbook. Ava returned to her work, knowing that she had again maintained control without causing a scene. Over the next week, Ava continued her improvements. She built a small garden with herbs and vegetables, carefully following local rules. She cleaned the area near the barn, planting flowers along the edge. Each change was subtle but significant, showing her vision for the property without violating any laws. The neighbors began to notice the difference. People who had once feared Karen's strict rules now admired Ava's care and thoughtfulness. A few approached her, asking questions and offering assistance. Ava welcomed the help and shared her plans for the property. Slowly, the neighborhood began to shift, seeing Ava not just as a new resident, but as someone who cared deeply for the community. One evening, as the sun set, Ava sat by the stream reflecting on the changes. She thought about Karen and her strict control over the HOA. Ava realized that Karen had underestimated her from the beginning. By staying calm, knowledgeable, and polite, Ava had gained respect from neighbors and maintained her authority over her land. Karen's influence was still strong, but it was no longer absolute. Ava felt a sense of satisfaction. She was proving that leadership could come from wisdom and care rather than intimidation. The next day, Ava decided to send a small note to Karen, inviting her to visit the property and see the improvements. She wanted to show that her actions were thoughtful and legal, not rebellious. Karen received the note with a mixture of curiosity and annoyance. She decided to visit, expecting to find violations or mistakes. When Karen arrived, Ava greeted her warmly. "Welcome, Karen. I'm glad you came to see the improvements. I hope you find them in order." Karen walked slowly around the property, inspecting the flowers, fountain, and garden. She checked the barn and the fences, comparing each detail to the HOA rules. Ava watched quietly, waiting for Karen's reaction. Finally, Karen spoke. "Everything seems to follow the rules," she admitted reluctantly. "I am surprised by how careful you have been." Ava smiled politely. "I want to maintain the land and respect the neighborhood. I also want to show that it is possible to improve property while following all rules." Karen's face flushed slightly. She had expected confrontation, but Ava's calm and careful approach had left her unsure of how to assert her authority. Ava realized that this moment marked a shift in their relationship. Karen could no longer rely solely on fear and control. Ava's knowledge, patience, and respect for the rules had given her influence and authority. As Karen left, Ava felt a sense of accomplishment. She had made significant improvements, gained respect from neighbors, and challenged Karen's assumptions without conflict. The neighborhood was beginning to see a new dynamic, and Ava knew that her careful approach would continue to shift the balance of power in subtle but meaningful ways. By evening, Ava returned to her favorite spot by the stream. The water glimmered under the setting sun, and the air was filled with the gentle sounds of nature. Ava felt connected to her land, her grandfather's legacy, and her own growing sense of confidence. She knew challenges would continue, especially with Karen watching closely, but she was prepared. Her knowledge, patience, and careful planning had already begun to change the neighborhood, and Ava was ready to continue this journey with determination and wisdom. Ava looked around at the land she had inherited, feeling pride and hope. The improvements she had made were only the beginning, and she knew that with careful thought and respect she could transform the property into a place of beauty and harmony. The shift had begun, and Ava was at the center, ready to lead not with fear but with intelligence, patience, and a deep love for her land. The sun rose slowly over Ava's inherited land, casting a golden glow on the barn, the stream, and the rolling hills. Ava had been awake for hours, walking through the property and reviewing her notes from the past week. She had made small improvements, gained respect from some neighbors, and held her ground against Karen's strict presence. But today Ava felt a sense of anticipation. She had discovered something in the old property documents that could change everything. The previous evening, while reviewing letters from her grandfather, Ava had found an official document from the HOA. It clearly stated that the owner of her specific land had certain decision-making powers that superseded the HOA in specific matters. Her grandfather had kept it hidden in a stack of papers, perhaps knowing that Karen's control had always been strong. Ava realized that this was the moment to understand fully the power she held as the landowner. Ava spent the morning carefully studying the document, highlighting key points. She noted that she had authority over all modifications on her land, including gardens, fences, and structures, as long as they complied with local laws. The HOA could suggest or request changes, but final decisions rested with her. Ava felt a surge of confidence. Karen's authority, which had seemed unshakable, was now limited in ways Ava had the legal right to use. By mid-morning, Ava decided it was time to act. She wanted to meet Karen not to fight, but to clarify the situation and assert her rights calmly. Ava prepared a small note inviting Karen to the property for a discussion. She wrote politely, explaining that she wanted to review HOA guidelines together and ensure compliance with all rules. Karen received the note and, true to form, arrived quickly, clipboard in hand. She walked onto Ava's land with the confidence of someone who assumed complete control. Ava greeted her warmly. "Good morning, Karen. Thank you for coming," Ava said. "I wanted to review some important details regarding the property and the HOA." Karen's smile was tight, her eyes scanning the property. "I see you have been busy. I hope you understand that the HOA expects cooperation and adherence to all rules." Ava nodded. "I understand, and I have been following the guidelines carefully. However, I recently found a document that clarifies the authority of the property owner in certain matters. I think it is important that we discuss it so that we are both clear on the responsibilities and rights." Karen's eyes flickered with surprise. "A document? I have been overseeing this neighborhood for years, and I am confident in my knowledge of the rules." Ava remained calm. "I respect your experience, Karen. I am not trying to challenge you unnecessarily. I simply want to ensure that all decisions are made with correct information." Karen motioned for Ava to show the document. Ava handed it to her carefully. Karen read through the pages, her brow furrowing as she absorbed the details. Slowly, she realized that Ava had more legal authority over the property than she had assumed. The words on the paper were clear, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Karen looked up, her expression a mix of shock and frustration. I had no idea this document existed," she admitted. "This changes everything," Ava smiled politely. "It clarifies the responsibilities and rights of the property owner. My goal is to ensure compliance with the rules while maintaining the integrity and beauty of the land." Karen paused, clearly struggling with the revelation. She had relied on her assumed authority for years, enforcing rules with strictness and sometimes fear. Now she realized that the balance of power had shifted. Ava was not trying to be difficult or confrontational. She was simply informed, calm, and firm. Over the next hour, Ava and Karen reviewed the HOA rules together, cross-referencing them with the document Ava had found. Ava explained her plans for the property, including the garden, the barn improvements, and the stream path. She emphasized that every change followed local laws and respected neighborhood guidelines. Karen listened, occasionally muttering under her breath. She could not deny that Ava's actions were legal and thoughtful. The fountain, the flowers, and the repairs were all well-planned and within her rights. Karen began to realize that her previous approach, strict control and intimidation, was no longer effective. Ava had a calm authority that was grounded in knowledge and preparation. Finally, Karen spoke. "I see that you have done everything correctly. I admit I misjudged your understanding of the rules and your intentions." Ava nodded. "Thank you for acknowledging that. I want to work together respectfully, but I also want to ensure that the property is managed correctly and legally. I believe this can be done without conflict." Karen's shoulders sagged slightly. She had always been proud of her control, but now she understood that she could no longer assume absolute authority. Ava's quiet confidence had created a new dynamic. Karen realized that respect and knowledge could achieve more than strict enforcement alone. A few neighbors, noticing the conversation, began to gather at a distance. They watched as Ava and Karen spoke calmly, and they began to see a shift in the neighborhood. Ava's approach was not aggressive, yet it was effective. Karen's influence, once absolute, was being balanced by Ava's rightful authority and thoughtful planning. After the meeting, Karen left the property with a mixture of relief and frustration. She had survived the encounter without public conflict, but she could not ignore the truth. Ava had the legal right to make decisions on her land, and her actions had been correct. Karen knew that she would need to adjust her approach if she wanted to maintain her role in the HOA. Ava, meanwhile, felt a sense of accomplishment and clarity. She had not only improved her property, but had also established her position firmly and legally. The revelation of the document had given her the confidence to act decisively while remaining respectful. She understood that true leadership came from knowledge, patience, and integrity. Over the next few days, Ava continued her improvements. She built a small seating area near the stream, using natural materials to blend with the environment. She planted additional flowers, created a small herb garden, and repaired sections of the fence that had been weak or damaged. Every step was thoughtful and deliberate. Neighbors began to approach more frequently. Some asked questions about the plants, the stream, and the barn improvements. Others offered advice or shared stories about the land and its history. Ava welcomed their engagement, seeing it as an opportunity to strengthen community bonds. She understood that building trust with neighbors was as important as maintaining the land itself. Karen, observing from a distance, found herself in a difficult position. She could still enforce certain HOA rules, but she could no longer assert control over Ava's property without respecting the legal document. The shift in power was undeniable. Karen realized that her previous methods of strict oversight and intimidation would need to change if she wanted to maintain respect in the neighborhood. One afternoon, Karen approached Ava again. This time her tone was more cautious. "I wanted to discuss a minor concern regarding the garden. I understand that you have legal authority, but I hope we can work together to ensure everything remains safe and compliant." Ava smiled warmly. "Of course, Karen, I appreciate your input. I will review the area and make adjustments if necessary, while ensuring the improvements remain safe and beautiful." Karen nodded, realizing that collaboration was the only way forward. She had underestimated Ava, but she now understood that respect, knowledge, and calm authority could achieve more than strict enforcement ever could. As the day ended, Ava sat by the stream once more. The water glimmered in the sunlight, reflecting the trees and the sky above. She felt a deep sense of connection to the land, her grandfather's legacy and her own growing confidence. The revelation had shifted the balance of power, but Ava understood that responsibility accompanied authority. She had the right to make decisions, but she also had the duty to act wisely and fairly. Ava knew that challenges would continue, but she was ready. Her careful planning, knowledge of the rules, and respectful approach had established her authority firmly. Karen, while still present, had been forced to recognize Ava's legal power and thoughtful leadership. The neighborhood was beginning to see a new balance, one based on fairness, knowledge, and integrity. And so Ava's journey continued. The land she had inherited was not just a property. It was a symbol of her grandfather's legacy, her own wisdom, and the potential for positive change. The revelation of her legal authority had empowered her to act confidently, and she knew that with patience, respect, and careful planning, she could transform not only her land, but also the neighborhood into a place of harmony and trust. Ava looked at the stream, the barn, and the rolling hills. She felt pride, hope, and determination. She had returned to her inherited land, faced challenges, and discovered the power she held. Now, with knowledge and patience, Ava was ready to shape the future, not through fear or control, but through fairness, respect, and thoughtful action. The sun rose slowly over Ava's land, painting the hills and barn with warm golden light. The air was calm, filled with the gentle sound of the stream and birds singing in the trees. Ava stepped outside, feeling a sense of peace. She had spent the past few weeks improving her property, learning about her rights and navigating her interactions with Karen, the strict HOA president. Now she felt that she had begun to create a new balance in the neighborhood. Ava's first task that morning was to inspect the garden near the barn. The herbs were growing well, and the flowers along the stream were blooming brightly. She walked carefully along the stone path, checking the small seating area she had built. Everything looked neat and inviting. Ava smiled, realizing how much the land had already transformed under her care. She felt connected to her grandfather's legacy, proud to be continuing his work with respect and thoughtfulness. As Ava worked, she noticed a few neighbors approaching. They had grown curious about the changes and wanted to offer assistance. Ava greeted them warmly. "Good morning," she said. "Thank you for coming. I am happy to have your help if you wish to join in planting or maintaining the garden." One neighbor, a woman named Grace, stepped forward with a small basket of seeds. "We wanted to add some more flowers to the garden," she said. "We thought you might like our help." Ava's eyes lit up. "That would be wonderful. Thank you." She showed them where to plant the seeds and explained how to arrange them so that the garden would bloom beautifully throughout the season. Soon, a small group of neighbors joined in, and together they planted flowers, arranged stones along the path, and tended to the herbs. Karen watched from a distance, standing near the edge of the property. She carried her clipboard, but she did not approach immediately. For the first time, Karen seemed unsure. Ava noticed her hesitation and continued guiding the neighbors with calm authority. Karen realized that Ava's influence extended beyond the land itself. People respected her not because of rules or fear, but because of her knowledge, fairness, and thoughtful leadership. After a while, Karen approached Ava cautiously. "I wanted to discuss some concerns," she said. Her voice was less sharp than before. "I see that you have been careful to follow the rules, but I need to ensure everything remains compliant." Ava nodded politely. "I understand, Karen. I appreciate your guidance. I will review any concerns you have and make adjustments if necessary. My goal is to maintain the land beautifully and respectfully." Karen studied the property quietly. She could not find any violations. Everything Ava had done was legal, safe, and thoughtfully planned. Slowly, Karen began to realize that her approach of strict control and fear would not work here. Ava had something stronger: knowledge, patience, and respect from the neighbors. "Your work is impressive," Karen admitted reluctantly. "I can see that you care deeply about the property and the neighborhood." Ava smiled. "Thank you, Karen. I believe that with cooperation we can make this neighborhood a beautiful and welcoming place for everyone." Karen nodded, taking in Ava's words. She realized that the balance of power had shifted. She could still enforce some HOA rules, but she could no longer control the narrative through intimidation alone. Ava had shown that fairness, intelligence, and respect could create a stronger influence than fear ever could. Over the next few days, Ava continued her work. She repaired additional sections of the barn, built a small tool shed, and created a walking path along the stream. Each improvement was carefully planned and executed, demonstrating her knowledge of the land and her respect for the rules. Neighbors began to approach more frequently, asking for guidance, sharing stories, and even offering help. Ava welcomed everyone warmly, creating a sense of community and cooperation. Karen, observing from a distance, began to change her approach. She no longer challenged Ava openly, but instead offered suggestions in a polite manner. She realized that working with Ava was more effective than resisting her. By cooperating, she could still maintain some influence, but without creating tension or conflict. Ava's calm authority had reshaped the neighborhood dynamic. One afternoon, Ava called a small meeting near the stream. She invited Karen and several neighbors to discuss future improvements. Ava spoke with confidence and warmth. "I want to ensure that this neighborhood is a place where everyone feels welcome and respected," she said. "We can work together to maintain the beauty of our community while also respecting each other's rights." The neighbors listened attentively, nodding in agreement. Karen stood quietly, absorbing Ava's words. For the first time, she felt that collaboration and respect could achieve more than strict enforcement. She realized that Ava's approach had not only improved the property, but it also strengthened the community. A few days later, Karen approached Ava privately. "I wanted to thank you," she said softly. "You have shown me a different way to lead. I see now that respect and knowledge can create harmony, rather than control and fear." Ava smiled warmly. "I am glad, Karen. We all have a role in maintaining this neighborhood, and cooperation makes it stronger. I appreciate your willingness to work together." From that day forward, a new balance took hold in the neighborhood. Ava continued her improvements, but she also began involving neighbors in small projects. Together, they planted flowers, repaired fences, and organized gatherings near the stream. The land became a hub of activity, filled with laughter, conversation, and the beauty of nature. Karen, while still attentive to HOA matters, learned to respect Ava's authority and approach. She offered guidance when necessary, but no longer relied on intimidation. The neighborhood residents noticed the change and began to feel a sense of freedom and happiness that had been missing for years. Ava's leadership had brought a positive transformation. One evening, Ava sat by the stream, watching the sunlight shimmer on the water. The birds had quieted, and the air was filled with the gentle scent of flowers. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction and pride. The land was flourishing, the community was growing closer, and even Karen had learned a valuable lesson about respect and collaboration. Ava reflected on the journey she had taken. She had returned to her inherited land, faced challenges, and discovered her authority. She had navigated Karen's strict control with patience, knowledge, and respect. In doing so, she had transformed not only her property but also the neighborhood. The stream reflected the colors of the sunset, and Ava felt a connection to her grandfather, who had once walked these hills and dreamed of a place where people could live in harmony with nature. Ava had honored his legacy and added her own mark. She had created a space where fairness, knowledge, and respect guided every decision. As night fell, Ava looked around at the garden, the barn, and the path along the stream. She felt peace, knowing that her work had brought balance to the neighborhood. The residents had begun to trust her, and even Karen had adapted to a new way of leading. Ava realized that true authority was not about control or fear, but about wisdom, patience, and collaboration. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood continued to thrive. The garden grew more colorful with each passing day. The stream path became a favorite spot for walks, and the barn and shed were well maintained. Ava continued to guide improvements, always ensuring that everyone worked together respectfully. Karen occasionally approached with suggestions, and Ava listened carefully, valuing her experience while maintaining her authority. The dynamic had shifted completely. Karen had learned to respect Ava, and the neighbors had begun to see the benefits of cooperation over fear. Ava's presence had created a sense of stability and harmony that had been missing for years. One bright morning, Ava stood at the top of a small hill overlooking her property. The wind blew gently through her hair, carrying the scent of flowers and fresh earth. She felt a sense of accomplishment and pride. She had returned to her inherited land, faced challenges, and transformed the neighborhood with patience, intelligence, and respect. The land had become a symbol of harmony and leadership, guided by fairness rather than control. Ava smiled, thinking about the future. There would be more work to do, more improvements to plan, and more ways to strengthen the community, but she felt confident and ready. She had learned that knowledge, patience, and respect could overcome even the strictest authority. The land was thriving, the neighborhood was happier, and Ava had proven that true leadership came from understanding and integrity. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Ava walked down to the stream, feeling the water on her hands. She knew that her journey had only begun, but the balance she had created was strong. The neighborhood had changed, Karen had adapted, and the residents were more connected than ever. Ava's inherited land had become more than a property. It was a place of fairness, beauty, and community. Ava took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the sun and the gentle sound of the stream. She had returned to her land, faced challenges with courage, and discovered the power of knowledge and respect. She had established a new balance, one that would guide the neighborhood for years to come. Ava knew that with patience, wisdom, and cooperation, her inherited land would continue to flourish, creating a legacy of harmony and leadership for generations.